My name is Neil Patel, and I'm your Young Professionals Director at Large for Western Division. And welcome to Increased Revenue with Social Media. I'm pleased to announce today's speakers. Josiah Mackenzie leads partnership at ReviewPro as Vice President of Business Development, where he helps hotel owners, just like ourselves, to get reviews and also create better travel experience for their guests and unlock new areas for revenue growth for their business. Josiah has been featured as an expert on several TV shows and is frequent keynote speaker on hotel technology. Please give a warm AAHOA welcome to Josiah Mackenzie.
Thank you, Neil. And thanks, everybody, for coming and joining us this afternoon. I've been really excited about today and look forward to joining you. I was actually at the first interaction that I had with AAHOA was 5 years ago, where I was working with some of the team on creating some educational content around social media. And it was kind of funny because I was looking back at the videos and the content we were producing, and we talked about a lot of things at that point. We looked at everything from how people were using social networks like Twitter and Facebook to share photos of their travel experiences. We looked at some of the opportunities for service that existed on helping people on some of those channels. We looked at some of the relationship between social media content and demand for hotels and revenue. And so we covered a lot. And so when we were thinking about this session today, we thought about social media. There's still a lot of interest around new social technologies, but we really wanted to focus on the revenue aspect of this, right? Because at the end of the day, you're running businesses and you own hotels and you operate hotels that exist to make money, right? So technology might exist that's new and cool, but when it comes time to allocating resources toward the different projects that you have going on, you need to decide what's going to drive the sort of returns that you're looking for. So when we were doing a little bit more thinking around this, we decided to focus our time together today on a subsection of social media, and that is social reviews and online ratings. And we did this for two reasons. First of all, for many of your hotels, social media reviews and online review content accounts for the vast majority of information about your hotels online. So there may be a few people that have posted a photo maybe on Facebook about staying at your property, but what you find is that a lot of people are probably going to TripAdvisor, maybe using a site like Google or Yelp to provide feedback. And of course, if you're working with distribution partners, Expedia, Booking, sites like that, they're very, very proactive in reaching out to your guests that are booking through those channels and soliciting feedback. So for a lot of hotels, limited service properties, mid-scale hotels, across the spectrum, both branded and independent, there tends to be a huge amount of feedback. And that really presents some interesting opportunities. The second reason why we wanted to focus on this is that online reviews and social ratings are actually the type of social media content that's viewed most or closest to the booking process. So when people have done a little bit of looking around and they've decided to visit a certain city, they've decided the neighborhood, maybe the price range, social reviews and content are often one of the last deciding factors on whether someone stays at your hotel or the hotel across the street. So we've seen social media mature quite a bit in that sense, where initially a lot of people were looking at social media as maybe a PR activity, a marketing opportunity, and that certainly exists. But what's matured in the use of social media over the past 5-ish years is an increasing focus on how does this make money for us. So some of you might be wondering, why do I have a picture of a random hotel up here? And I don't know if anyone has any guesses what this property is. Does it look familiar? Nobody? Well, it's actually the world's oldest continuously operated hotel. So it's been in a family in Japan for over 1,400 years, handed down generation after generation, and it looks pretty good, right? It looks like a lot of hotels in different areas around the world, but I use that as an example or just a highlight to the fact that the fundamental drivers of hospitality, of course, are pretty timeless. right? So it's about taking care of guests, making sure that they feel welcome, that they receive good service, that the expectations they had on visiting your hotel are met, right? So what's new over the past 5 to 10 years with some social technologies and some new ways for people to share information is that anyone can share any thought anytime, right? And so often in social media presentations, we see some big spectacular fails, maybe where a brand was really bad on taking care of their customer, or we see on the flip side maybe a cool marketing activity. But again, when thinking about this from your perspective and the hotels that you own and operate, we need this to make money for you. Okay, so thinking about this dynamic that's changed, where we have people that have sort of a microphone that can share anything at any time, but also the fundamental drivers of successful hospitality, listening to customers, taking care of them, and so that they come back to our hotels, that they tell their friends. Those aspects have remained the same. So what I want to talk about with you today is how do we build on what has historically driven hospitality success with some of the new technologies and data sets that we have. So we're going to keep this pretty practical. I want to open up with a little bit of research to set some context, and then we're going to look at how to use social media in 3 different aspects of operating a hotel: in operations, in marketing, and in revenue strategy. So just to begin with a little bit of numbers, I wanted to run through a few studies quickly on research teams that have looked at the relationship between social media content and social reviews and revenue performance. The study we have up on the screen was conducted over a 2.5-year period where a team at the Cornell Center for Hospitality Research looked at hotels across the US and Europe. And they looked at competitive reputation data from ReviewPro, and they looked at financial data from STR. So they were looking at RevPAR, occupancy, ADR, and they found a really, really close connection between reputation, social reputation, and revenue performance. You can see up on the screen here a close connection across each of these areas. What was also remarkable is that this social reputation and social media comments was affecting revenue not only online, which makes sense, right? If people are seeing this online before they book, it would make sense that's going to drive some of your financial performance there. But it was also effective on offline bookings as well. So people calling in, making reservations, walk-ins, hotels that had superior reputations were able to capitalize on and benefit from that. So kind of moving a little bit into and taking that sort of philosophy and putting it to work, this is a really interesting opportunity because for many hotels, you can't just pick up a hotel and move it somewhere else. So if the location's, you can't just change that overnight. Investing capital into a hotel asset to upgrade or refurbish takes some time. So a quick win for improving revenue performance is often in the area of improving reputation, right? Thinking about how do we serve our guests better so that they leave these positive reviews, and it gives us this sort of demand that we can capitalize on. So taking that whole notion of social reputation driving demand for your hotels and revenue a step further, the research team at Cornell then went and looked at hotel valuation. Right, so it makes logical sense if a hotel is able to earn more money from a superior guest reputation, then it would make sense that increased revenue would eventually make a hotel more valuable, right? It's a more profitable business. So Professor Anderson looked at US-based lodging real estate investment trusts over 18 months and again saw something really interesting. The Global Review Index, or overall quality online, was a leading indicator for share prices. So they were looking at the reputation for each hotel in a portfolio. They rolled that up for each of these REITs and found that as certain hotels were making more money, as certain collections of hotels were making more money, that influenced the reputation, but also the revenue and the share price. So quickly, I know many of you in this room own hotels, and so you're sort of looking at this at 2 levels. You're not only thinking about how do we run and operate the hotels more efficiently, but for those of you that own hotel assets, there's also the angle to this where we're thinking, how do we improve the value of these assets in a way that potentially we could sell them down the road or things like that. So we've seen this used quite a bit, both on the buy side for people shopping for hotel assets, understanding, if there's an asset that's priced significantly below market, saying, are there some quick wins that we could make in terms of the guest experience and turn this around? So it's a value play there. And then for owners of assets, thinking, what are the quick wins that we can do to improve guest satisfaction at our properties and earn more revenue? So we see a lot of interest on that side of things. And then the final component to this is looking at the connection between social reputation and profitability. So a few months ago, Cornell professor Kathy Entz looked at the relationship between not only social reviews, but net RevPAR, which is basically RevPAR after you take out all the customer acquisition costs. And again, there's a really strong connection there as well. So the bottom line is that when you make your guests happy by using some social technologies and analysis of online reviews, this creates this environment that tends to make you more money, increases demand, but more of that revenue flows to your bottom line. It's not so wrapped up by customer acquisition costs. So let's take a look at this and think about how to put this research to work across your hotels. And the first area that I want to look at this is in the area of operations. So I had the chance to speak with some of you as we were waiting for the session to begin, and a recurring theme that I heard was there's a lot of interest in social media, but as seasoned hotel operators and owners, you know that you actually have to improve operations to drive the business performance that you're looking for, right? So you can't just run a social campaign or respond to some reviews and expect that's going to change your business. So smart operators are thinking about how do we use all this information online. Again, people can say whatever they want, whenever they want. So there's a huge amount of guest feedback out there, and how do we use this to improve? So for the past number of years, as hotels have seen more and more people sharing their guest feedback online, there's been this practice of reputation management that's emerged, right? So that often includes looking at overall quality scores. There's a number of companies that aggregate ratings from across the web, and so that's certainly one place to begin. A lot of you are looking at rankings. Where do we stand across TripAdvisor and various other review sites, and this is really important, right? Because when you're rated highly on these types of sites, more people find your hotel, so it's important for the business. But it's a starting point, right? So it's something that you need to make sure that you're taking care of, but it tends to be very reactive, right? Because we're looking to see feedback coming in, we're responding back to the guest, and we're kind of waiting to see what happens. What we're seeing right now is when it comes to social media and reputation management, there's this shift towards what I like to call guest experience improvement. So this is more taking the fate of your business into your own hands and being and getting ahead of the curve by looking at trends, right? So if a certain amount of people have complained about service or about cleanliness, over the past year, has that gotten better? If we look at this summer versus last summer, how has that changed over time? So trying to understand trends, what's going on, and then it's making real changes to improve that. Real service changes. Do we greet guests maybe in a little bit of a different way because we've noticed certain complaints about maybe lines on check-in, and making real product changes. So thinking about where does renovations have to take place and that kind of thing. So one of the key opportunities here is using technology to summarize this and involve the team. I know many of you work with different franchisors, and a number of you have independent hotels. What's really remarkable for me working with a number of franchise groups is if you look across guest satisfaction on many of these organizations, sometimes a lot of the hotel assets are very similar. The operating standards are similar, the CapEx spending plans are similar, but you see a really wide range in guest satisfaction. And so I've always been kind of curious to understand what are the drivers behind that. And so with a number of groups, I've looked at some of the top performing hotels and also ones that are underperforming. And one of the biggest differences is for top performing hotels, general managers and operators are very, very engaged in making sure their entire team is really obsessed with what people are saying online. And so we've seen many cases where the different, especially for larger hotels, different functional areas, whether it's rooms or housekeeping, maybe F&B, maybe your front office, front desk, check-in process, each of them getting specific scorecards and reports on what people are saying about that area. And this could be done across the hotel. Obviously, it depends on the size of the operation that you have, the size of your hotel. But this is one of the biggest differentiating factors that we see, getting everybody involved in the improvement process. Okay, so thinking about changing gears a little bit and thinking about marketing, there's also an opportunity here. And so I'm not going to get so much into specific Facebook and Twitter campaigns. I want to share some things that I've seen work across many types of hotels. And the first opportunity comes down to using this for messaging. Now, anytime you're running a marketing operation or you're leading sales, the first thing to consider is, of course, what do you say? How do we present our hotel or our hotels in a way that differentiates us versus competition? And so I see sometimes marketers and salespeople just think maybe we have free Wi-Fi, maybe we're close to a major attraction, and then they automatically assume this is the best way to promote our hotel. But with social feedback, there's also a really interesting opportunity to scan across all of this and see what are the recurring themes that keep coming up here. So I have some examples. This is from ReviewPro, the technology that I'm working on. But you can see it scanning across hundreds or thousands of comments. And for this particular hotel, on the left-hand side, we can see a lot of really positive feedback about the hotel's location, the staff, the beds, things like that. So these are great things to talk about. And on the right hand, you can see where it's possible to extract specific phrases. So people are saying, great, nice big pillows. The beds are super cozy. So again, this comes down to seeing what do people love most about your hotel. And if you operate a hotel, maybe it's by the highway. A lot of people are driving through, maybe just sleeping there 6-7 hours before they hit the road again. Maybe the sleep quality is the most important thing. And if you find that people really love what you offer there, maybe that is one of the best things to promote. So I see a lot of this both in advertising, kind of people weaving in some of these guest comments into advertising. On a sales perspective, if you're completing an RFP or something like that, looking at data, and then you can just show with statistics, here's what hundreds or thousands of guests have said about our hotel. And you can also run this, of course, because all this information is public, you can compare each of these attributes of your hotel with other hotels in the city or your direct comp set. So this is really powerful to say, we have, according to guests, we have the best location, in the city or in our neighborhood. So there's a big opportunity there. The second opportunity is linked to that around using this information for conversion. Again, depending on the hotels that you have, some of you may have an opportunity to have your own website, or if you have an independent hotel, focus a lot of attention on driving direct bookings and saving commission cost. So I've seen a lot of hotels take guest feedback from across the web, some of them using kind of an overall quality widget, like we see on the right-hand side. Others are including a stream of content on their site. But the whole idea here is to have your happy guests become like salespeople for you, right? Rather than me saying that I have the best hotel in the area, why don't you show references from all these guests that have shared feedback elsewhere? So this could be a really interesting thing to look at in terms of driving direct bookings. The third area of marketing I want to touch on is around forming relationships that are going to earn loyalty. And I'm talking here about real loyalty, the kind of loyalty where I'm not just bribed to come back after staying 200 nights. A connection that I feel like I've been listened to, I've been taken care of. So when I come through town again, I'm going to stay at this hotel. And I'm going to recommend it to my friends. So I've worked with Bill Lenahan, who's the CMO at Red Lion Hotels for some time. And I like what he says, what they're doing there. He says, we recognize every guest from their first day with friendly service and some special membership perks. In effect, we're earning the loyalty of our guests instead of asking them to earn ours. So it's thinking here, how do we creatively serve them? This is their Spokane property. I was there 4 years ago. Pretty standard hotel, built in the 70s, nothing too special. I went back a few weeks ago, and they had created kind of a fun area to hang out in the lobby and had a number of little service amenities that were very low cost to offer. but I felt special there, like a bottle of water in the room and things like this, next time I'm in Spokane, I want to stay there. So this sort of approach of thinking, how do we identify what people are asking for based on all these comments that are on social media, and then how can we provide it in a way that connects with guests? So the final area that I want to touch on is in revenue strategy directly. Obviously, this field has evolved quite a bit over the past few years, but there's a few opportunities on using comments from the social web as part of your revenue strategy program. The first of those is looking at your hotel from the perspective of prospective guests. So when people are, again, thinking about visiting an area, oftentimes they'll pull up a site like TripAdvisor and look to see what people are saying positively and negatively. They look to see which hotels guests love the most. So all this is public. You can understand versus your comp set, are you being rated higher than they are, lower than they are, and why? And then when it gets into revenue strategy and thinking about specific segments, maybe people coming from different markets, people booking on different channels, you can also understand satisfaction against your competitors among detailed segments. So this is a great piece of insight that revenue managers now have, is to look at some of this kind of stuff and think, where do we stand? We've actually seen a lot of hotel groups now start to visualize the competitive landscape with their star report data. And so when that Cornell research first came out, the first one I mentioned that was linking the Global Review Index with revenue performance, we had one client that built a spreadsheet that was, in essence, showing this quadrant here, where on the y-axis they had their competitive guest satisfaction, and on the x-axis they had their revenue performance. So the idea was, for any hotel in their portfolio, they could understand, is if it's in the revenue risk where we're charging more than average of our competitive set, but we're not providing an experience that's on par with our competitive set. Over time, they tend to lose business, right? Because people find that they can get better value elsewhere. So this is a caution area, right? On the other side, if they're in the top left-hand quadrant and they're providing a better than average guest experience and they're not charging as much as their competitors, maybe they're leaving money on the table. So we've had quite a few hotel groups start testing ways to maybe bump up the room rates, maybe $5 a night, $10 a night, higher, and capitalizing on what they've done on providing a great guest experience. So there's opportunities to do that. This is just an example of one hotel group we work with. And you can see, if you have 3 hotels or 20 hotels, you can see the properties that you need to focus attention on. So this has been really helpful for owners to understand where to prioritize capital, but also attention. Where do we need to make improvements? Where are guests asking for help on upgrading the guest experience there? And so one thing I would encourage you to think about is, depending on how your company is structured, getting revenue managers and your operators sitting together at the same table, looking at the same data. This is how we're doing it in ReviewPro, where we not only visualize with STR where your hotels are positioned, but we show here are the top areas that you need to focus on to improve. So however you do this, I really encourage you to think about bringing these two disciplines together and thinking about improving guest satisfaction, but in the context of getting that competitive edge. And then the final aspect of this is really thinking about direct pricing with reputation data. So there's a number of companies that are taking in competitive reputation data from ReviewPro and others out there, and then recommending rates and showing by night where you might be able to increase your rates without losing occupancy. And so we've had a few hotel brands have quite a bit of success with that, and it could be something to look at if you when you're looking at revenue management technologies. So that is it. I hope you this was helpful as we've kind of looked at how to use social media and social feedback across your business in different areas. We have case studies and more examples at ReviewPro.com, so I encourage you to check that out if you want to learn a little bit more. But at this point, we're going to open it up for any questions. Neil has a mic, So just raise your hand if you have a question, and we can go through that. So,
I always have guests that, they'll go out of the way to write a bad review than leave a good review. They go, if everything was good, I'm not going to write it. But bad, they'll write a bad review. And I don't understand the people. I travel. I do look at reviews sometimes. But sometimes a place that has a lot of bad reviews happens to be a great place. It just happens to be there's a lot of idiots that write bad reviews. And I don't know who in the world likes to live or travel vicariously through other people's misfortune,
So it's an interesting thing, because I think there are certainly people that will only go to social media to rant. And I had a conversation earlier about some of the things to think about on that level. From a data standpoint, though, if you look at it, we look across, again, working with 30,000 hotels, we look across 100 plus review sites. On average, only about 10 to 15%, depending on the sector and the type of brand, only 10 to 15% are negative reviews. And over 70% are positive. So the vast majority of content online from most hotels is super positive, but there are some people that will go and I think consumers in general kind of tend to take things with a bit of a grain of salt. So if someone has written a 10-paragraph rant, they can understand, hey, let's look at the 500 other reviews to balance it out. So I think there's an interesting point. I actually had a conversation before about this, and I think there's some, depending on who you're working with, there's some big brands that have a process in place. We were talking about Hilton earlier, and how they tie each guest reservation so they can kind of see if someone doing this on every other stay and asking for a full refund, and then maybe it makes sense to not rent the room to them. If you're running an independent hotel, I think that the big thing is making sure that you're keeping a log of this and cross-checking with others to understand, is this something that's happening? And then if someone tries to blackmail and then ends up going on TripAdvisor, you can dispute that there. I think to your point of kind of what's a valid piece of feedback, TripAdvisor and others do not require a reservation, but they have processes in place to make sure that to try to validate the authenticity. And if you look at validated review sites like Expedia and the satisfaction level, for most hotels it's quite similar. But if there's a bad apple there, you need to report it to Google or to TripAdvisor and make sure it's taken out. Well, there you go. Thank you. Next question.
My question is, 99% is happy people. They don't complain, but they don't write review. But the 1% who is bad, or lemon, what you call a lemon people, they just want to write something bad, and they stay there. So how often the review people check or audit or validity of those complaining customers, or do they take give them another chance to screw up the other motel review?
Yeah, so just to clarify, Neil mentioned at the beginning, but I work for a company called ReviewPro that basically acts like a mirror for what exists online. So our technology basically tracks all of these review sites, and then we say, okay, here's all the stuff that's come in, and we show you opportunities for improvement. But to your question about, if there's someone that is negative, do we validate? We don't validate at ReviewPro, but again, TripAdvisor has some mechanisms there. Expedia and other OTAs are validating with a reservation. I think if your hotel is getting hit with a number of people that are just posting negative reviews, and that there's a lot of people out there that are happy and not sharing, again, it goes back to the first question of asking those happy guests to share, maybe thinking about on our survey, can we have a really quick way to collect more positive reviews? Because you want to balance the scale, because you and I could talk about maybe that situation happening, but a consumer that's just looking at TripAdvisor might not know that backstory. So you have to jump ahead of that and think about how do we get more happy guests talking.
Mostly people come from travel agencies. They book from outside. They are the one writes, right? So is there travel agencies any responsibility that they're people, they're sending the people, they are writing good or bad, and why it was bad, or validity or verify? See, they defame the property or a particular property or particular franchise. That is just customer, it's not like customer privilege. They're doing wrong. So what is the options?
Yeah, it depends a little bit of the brands that you're working with, or if you have an independent hotel, like there's different processes, I guess, options on on, can you kind of ban someone from staying at you? What's the escalation procedure? In my experience, if you're just talking about review sites, there's a process where you can dispute a review. I think in terms of preventing someone who's abusing, your staff or making these kind of complaints, you need to look at it, how do we make sure that this person isn't coming back again and again and causing the same problems? And so that might be run through the brand, it might be run through another organization. But yes, we have one more question.
Yeah, I have more of a comment than a question. There was a comment that Yelp or other people, they filter reviews. We also had the same issue. So what we notice is these portals or website, they mostly filter based on the IP address. So originally, like when guests were staying at our property, we were encouraging them to leave the reviews. So for all those guests, the IP address was same because they were using our internet system. So now what we do is instead of encouraging those reviews when they are staying, let's say the people are staying 3 or 4 days, we are encouraging those reviews when they are leaving our hotel. That has significantly helped us. Otherwise, when guests were happier, they were staying at our thing, let's say 4 or 5 people will go online, Yelp.com or Expedia, they will leave positive review, and we were noticing more and more those reviews were filtered, while now we just changed the strategy. Instead of encouraging, we had the thing at the end. That helps a lot on that, yeah. Just want to clarify. That practice has helped us a lot, yeah.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, and it's thinking about processes like that, kind of given the nature of how TripAdvisor does this. Yeah. Thank you. And thank you to everybody who joined us today. It was great to be with you, so thank you very much. Thanks, Neil. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. Thanks.
Please give Josiah one more round of applause. Thank you so much.